This is another delusional UNESCO decision. This time they have determined that the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron is a Palestinian site, in other words, not Jewish, and that the site is endangered. Not a Jewish site? Who is buried there? Our forefathers and mothers. And that it is in danger? Only where Israel is present, like in Hebron, is freedom of worship ensured for everybody. Throughout the Middle East, mosques, churches and synagogues are being blown up, places where Israel is not present. So we will continue to guard the cave of the patriarchs, to ensure religious freedom for everybody, and we will continue also to guard the truth.
Israel is furious that the UN has declared an ancient tomb in the West Bank city of Hebron a Palestinian site. Anger and animosity between the two sides seems as high as ever. 17 years ago today, US President Bill Clinton convened a landmark meeting between the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Palestinian Authority Chairman Yasser Arafat at a retreat in the US state of Maryland. It was the Camp David Summit, and it went down in infamy for the high expectations going into it and its complete failure to reach a deal. Almost 2 decades on, Israel continues its occupation and building of settlements in Palestinian territories, and Palestinians continue attacking Israeli soldiers. So, are the prospects for peace as dim as they've ever been? Well, joining me now from Tel Aviv is Shlomo Ben-Ami. He's Israel's former foreign minister, who now serves as the vice president of the Toledo International Center for Peace. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. Looking at the historical timeline, it's been 50 years of occupation, 50 years since Israel seized the West Bank and Gaza in a state of war. They've held on to it. There's been no peace with the Palestinians, no two states for two people. Do you believe that Israel first needs to end the occupation in order to get peace?
Well, I think that there were Israeli governments that, as you might remember, tried it quite sincerely. Both the Barak government and the Ehud Olmert government tried to reach a settlement with the Palestinians and came very close to reaching it. The fact that it did not happen is a major tragedy. And the question today is whether we have the conditions, both politically, that is inside Israel and inside the Israeli polity, if the conditions exist for such a breakthrough. Seemingly, there is a readiness by the American administration to go ahead, to push forward the peace process. I have, however, my doubts if this is an administration that can persist in the inevitably tortuous process of ups and downs in this kind of negotiations. But I think that the parties need to give it a try. Israel, let me tell you, I cannot vouch for the current government, obviously not. But the only thing I can tell you is that if you look at the history of the Zionist movement, of the Israeli or the Jewish national movement in modern times, you will see that this is a movement that was always about demography more than about territory. And the fact that the two stand in stark contradiction when it comes to the area between the Jordan Valley, the Jordan River, and the Mediterranean, you might see that there is an inherent interest of this particular national movement not to occupy land that will dilute the Jewish majority. That was the reason that Sharon disengaged from Gaza. That was the reason that brought Rabin into the peace process. That was the reason that brought Olmert into the peace process. So I still hope that the fear, the rejection of the idea of being diluted into an Arab majority, this is what might at some point bring the Israelis to understand there is no other way but to disengage from the territories.
Mm-hmm. Well, the way they seem to be dealing with it, and as you say, you're not going to vouch for the current government, but the way that Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to want to deal with it is by being firm. Now, in his opinion, he's keeping Israel safe, he's making Israel strong. He builds settlements, so that increases, I guess, geography and demography. It's a very militaristic approach. He pulverizes Gaza periodically as and when he needs to. He entrenches the occupation of the West Bank. With all of this in mind, 70 years on since the foundation of the State of Israel, when people look at this current policy of the Netanyahu government, how do you feel?
Well, I tend to agree more or less with what you say. As I said before, I can't vouch for this government, and judging by his policies, one can see that Netanyahu has two traits, two tactics, as it were, for maintaining himself in power, and both work against a viable peace process. One is that he has been building his political power on fear. I mean, if you look at all the electoral campaign, all the discourse, this is never a discourse of hope. It is a discourse of Israel surrounded by enemies. If it is not Hamas, it is Hezbollah. If it is not Hezbollah, it is Iran. That has been quite a persistent way that Netanyahu decided to build his political power base. And the second is that he behaves more as a politician than as a statesman. That is, he cares for his coalition. He caters to the necessity of his constituency, or his political constituency. And I have the view that a leader, wherever, in Israel, in Palestine, in Turkey, wherever, a leader that wants to create major changes and major breakthroughs in protracted situations, in protracted conflicts, in divisive conflicts such as the one we have with the Palestinians, he must at some point disengage from his political power base. Being so loyal to your political power base turns you into the hostage of your electoral campaign, and therefore you cannot really do the things that the nation needs. Sharon, as you might remember, was the leader of Likud, but when he wanted to disengage from Gaza, he had to leave Likud. He had to create a different center-right instead of right-right coalition. So I think that these two things, Netanyahu's main preoccupation with his political power base, instead of thinking broadly, is, in my view, one of the major reasons that we cannot have in this kind of government any kind of breakthrough with the Palestinians.
But you say it's a preoccupation with his political power base. Others would look at it and say this is what the majority wants. Why would he need to change anything if this is what the electorate wants? He's reflecting the will of the people, and the people want a strong leader who enforces the status quo.
Well, you have a very good point here. Nonetheless, you see, opinion is movable. It can shift. Opinion doesn't, Israelis do not wake up in the morning and ask themselves, what are we going to do with the Palestinians? Whether are we going to withdraw, create a Palestinian state, divide, yes or no, Jerusalem? You know, when we were in government and we went to Camp David, before we started the summit, only 5% of the Israelis were ready to consider dividing Jerusalem. Polls showed that when we came back from this rather pedagogic sort of essay political pedagogic sort of essay in Camp David, the opinion shifted, and people around 30% and 40% were ready for that. If you conduct a poll now in Israel, you will discover that the majority of Israelis would agree to a Palestinian state. They do not trust the Palestinians. They would be very comfortable comfortable with a prime minister that doesn't push too much for a settlement. So it depends on leadership. It depends on leadership to shape opinion, to explain why this is so important for us as a nation. And this is exactly what Netanyahu doesn't do. But opinion is not the problem. You see, only 30%, Netanyahu has 30 seats in a parliament of 120. So Netanyahu himself as a leader, this is what he has, a quarter of the nation. The question is, what kind of coalition you build? Whom do you bring in? Whom you relinquish as a partner? And this is his choice. I mean, he decided to have this coalition with the Jewish Home and with Lieberman and the rest of it. He could have done it differently.
My final question to you, sir. The Israelis want peace, no doubt. Palestinians want justice. Are the two compatible at all, and is that why this is so intractable?
Well, peace and justice are not always cannot always coincide. You know, the kind of justice that some of the Palestinians want is impossible. You need to draw a line between peace and justice, to sacrifice some of the justice in order to have peace. Full justice is a recipe for not having peace. And if you look at the Palestinian tragedy, it is a major tragedy. It is a tragedy of almost cosmic dimensions. And they always had a problem to translate this right that they have into a political settlement. After all, we are talking about a Palestinian state that will be more or less 6,000 kilometers square, sandwiched between two states that do not suffer from an excess of love to the Palestinian cause. One is Jordan, another Israel. So it is not particularly attractive. And I could see it personally whenever the Palestinians came close to a settlement, whenever they came with an Israeli partner to a viable deal, to something that looked as a dignified deal, they retracted. They did not cross the river. We could turn the ocean that divides us into a river, but they did not cross it. It happened to us when the Clinton peace parameters were rejected by the Palestinian side, and it happened to Olmert. The position of the Palestinians is normally, yes, that was the last thing that the Prime Minister was doing. He was very weak politically. Olmert was about to stand he was under investigation for some criminal activities that he has done, etc., etc. And I always say, listen, the Israeli Prime Minister, if you know well the Israeli mind, the Israeli psyche, the Israeli political system, you will understand that every Israeli prime minister, when he puts a forward-looking, an extremely forward-looking peace proposal on the table, this will always be the last thing he will be doing as a prime minister. Because people want peace, but they are not very happy with the price. Everybody wants peace. The problem is the price. And if the price is such that it divides Jerusalem, it allows for some kind of even symbolic right of return, it dismantles scores of settlements, it creates a political earthquake. It is so difficult that he will not be able to sustain it. But then if the Palestinian side decides to accept the proposal, even if it is not signed, even if it is not implemented, it becomes the internationally recognized reference for a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. And it is a pity that they always found a reason why not.
Right.
Arafat was looking for George W. Bush. He believed that George W. Bush was the son of George Bush, the father.
Right.
The political son, that is. But he was
Ben-Ami.
not the political son. He was one of the staunchest Zionists in the White House.
I've got to jump in.
Conditions change.
So I wish we could go on, but I've got to wrap. Sir, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Shlomo Ben-Ami, former Israeli foreign minister. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.